Hi everyone, welcome to Outgrow's Marketer of the Month. I'm your host Saksham Sharda. I'm the creative director at Outgrow, and I have with me here my co-host Anushka Chopra, who is the social media and outreach analyst at Outgrow. And for this month, we're going to interview Barry Adams, who is the founder and SEO expert at Polemic Digital. So Barry, we're going to start with a rapid fire round just to break the ice. Try to keep your answers to one word or one sentence only. And Anushka is going to start with the first question just now.
Yeah, we need some background. We need some background music to build the tension, Saksham.
There you go. It's going.
Okay, so Barry, the first question is, what's your middle name?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The first question is, what's your middle name?
I don't have a middle name. I was just given one starting name, and that's it, and a surname.
Okay.
That's okay for me, though. Yeah.
Okay, the second question is, are tomatoes a fruit or a vegetable?
They're a fruit.
Okay. Actually, I don't know myself. I didn't even check up. But okay.
Okay. Who's your favorite Harry Potter character?
Probably Voldemort.
That's interesting. Okay.
Okay, so an SEO expert's favorite character is Voldemort. Okay, I was going to say, I'm going to introduce one question myself here. How long does it take you to get ready in the morning for work?
About 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Decent time.
Okay. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
I probably prefer to speak every language in the world.
Okay.
You have to pick one now, Neil Patel or Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, do I have to pick one?
Yeah.
It's a split.
Neither, really. I don't like either of them.
People do this often.
Okay. Giving presents or getting presents?
Giving presents. Much more fun.
That's sweet. Okay.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
2.
That's not bad, actually. Okay. What's something you could eat for a week straight?
Beef jerky.
Ooh.
Okay.
Fill in the blank. I can survive on dash hours of sleep.
7.
7, okay.
That's a lot, actually. Okay. Okay, this one's serious. What does a person need to be happy?
Love. People need love.
Okay.
That is so sweet.
Fill in the blank and SEO prediction for 2019.
Google will always win.
Google will always win. Okay. All
Okay.
right, so that was the end of the rapid fire round. Let's
Okay,
now
so
go ahead to the first question.
Yeah.
Anushka, you want to ask the first question?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. So let's start with talking about you, Barry. On your LinkedIn profile, I saw that you went from being a lecturer to a coach, chief editor, and then finally founded your own company. How did you initially get interested in SEO?
Oh, SEO dates back to the late 1990s, really, when I built my own website in HTML and realized nobody was visiting it. So, then you start doing the research, like, why is nobody looking at this awesome website? And you realize that you have to earn it. You have to go out there and get the traffic. I didn't even realize it was called SEO. I just, did what I thought I needed to do to show up in Alta Vista and Hotbot and Ask Jeeves and all of those. And then in mid-2000s, I had a job as an international webmaster at a company. It's still the coolest job title I've ever had, by the way.
Yeah, sounds like cool.
And SEO was part of my remit, and they sent me to a conference, Search Engine Strategies, in New York, and that's when I really caught the bug, so to speak, when I really got obsessed about SEO and realized that I wanted to make a career out of that. The lecturing is something I've been doing for the last, 8 or 9 years. In addition to my regular jobs, I do a few guest lectures every year for local universities. Because I do think it's important that marketers and developers as well, who are being educated right now, have at least a basic understanding of what SEO is and what it's not, and how they need to be aware of it. when they market and build websites.
So you're saying you were automatically doing SEO forever, and then it suddenly became a thing because SEO came along in the field.
I mean, it's still a growing industry, which is one of the things that I like about it. I mean, it hasn't reached peak SEO yet, if there is such a thing. Search is still growing, still more people coming online, especially on mobile devices, and using websites like Google to find what they're looking for. So there's an ever-growing remit for people to make those websites more findable, more discoverable, and that's what SEO is doing in general. To connect people to what they're looking for on websites.
All right, Anushka, you want to go with the next question?
Okay, so this one's about your company, Polemic Digital. So it provides SEO-related services, right? What are the most common problems that you've encountered so far? Or what is something that everyone doesn't know about SEO, or something that everyone gets wrong?
I think a lot of people don't understand how Google works, and everything that they do wrong on their website stems from that misunderstanding, which is of course entirely natural because they're not SEOs, they're not search engine engineers themselves. So almost all the problems that exist on websites come from that root cause that they don't really understand what Google does and how it does it. And it's not actually in its structure a particularly complicated machine. I think a lot of people think SEO is this big dark art where we have a magic toolkit of unicorn dust that we drape over websites and voila, they float to the top. But it's not actually that complicated. It's more about not putting obstacles in the way of search engines to make sure that your content can be very easily crawled and indexed, and make sure that the content itself is good enough to earn that top spot, to really deserve to be ranked high, because it actually helps people solve problems and helps people do whatever they need to do. So that would be my number one thing. I think, especially for people who work on the marketing side, the digital marketing side within organizations, having even just a very basic grasp of how search engines work can be so incredibly helpful, because it tends to prevent a lot of problems from occurring in the first place.
Okay. Yep,
I'm interested by the use of the word polemic digital, because polemic, as you'd know, is like a strong verbal or written attack on something, or like a debate. So How did you guys end up choosing that title for something like SEO?
That's based on my own personal reputation, as it were. I am known to be a bit argumentative online, especially on Twitter, and I've also written some blog posts which could be described as polemics. So I thought, why not just capitalize on that aspect of my brand reputation and make it into the business.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, cool.
I'll ask the next question now. An important thing marketers have started focusing on is voice search. Do you think that it has a promising future?
I do, but it is a little bit overhyped at the same time. I think we have to be careful to qualify things as voice search when they're basically just voice actions. Someone who uses a smart speaker or a smartphone to, play music or call their mom or whatever it is, that's not a search really, that's an action. A search is more in the context of people trying to find information and finding products, and in the context of voice, that is not quite as abundant as voice actions. But it is definitely growing, and it is not something we want to ignore. I think voice search is a technology that it will pay to be an early adopter for, to get your website ready for that as soon as possible, to implement things like structured data markup on your website to make your content fully machine readable, and to make sure that it can be used by voice assistants like Google Assistant or Amazon Alexa as answers to questions that people might ask, or products that people might use voice search to search for. So yes, it is overhyped, but at the same time, you do want to get on board quite quickly.
Yeah, I agree.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I have. We really have seen this trend grow in the last couple of years. The world of marketing is constantly evolving. We've gone from static to long, interactive content, from desktops to mobile, and now voice search is something new that's coming. So, how do you think that it will affect SEO particularly?
I think it has just become an extra aspect for SEOs to pay attention to when they analyze websites and when they implement changes on their website. And, it's pretty much in line with what websites are already encouraged to do in that they have to make their content easily understood for search engines and implement things like structured data. And there's some specific types of structured data like the QA page and the how-to markup that will help search engines understand your content on such a level that it can be used when people ask questions like, how do I do this? Or what is this? What is that? So it basically expands the remit of SEO a little bit more into the technical side and the code side to make content on web pages completely machine readable to be able to be used by voice search assistants and voice search technologies.
Okay.
Do you think a lot of, how many people are approaching your company to implement voice search at this point?
I don't get any specific requests for it, but I do, when I do SEO audits for clients, I do highlight it as opportunities for clients to tap into. And they do tend to see that as a good opportunity once I point it out to them. But it's not something that I get specific requests from clients for yet to look at. But I do expect that to change in the near future.
Okay, all right. The next one is yours, Anushka.
No, I think you can ask this one. It's good.
Okay, so tell me something most SEO professionals think is true that you think is bullshit, or something you think is true that most SEO professionals think is bullshit.
Apart from research being overhyped.
That's tough. That's tough. Of course, I'm always right, naturally.
There comes Polemic Digital with the polemics. All right.
I have to think about this. I try not to be too dogmatic in a lot of my views. I suppose one of the things I'm a bit known for is that I don't have a high opinion of JavaScript. And there's a lot of SEOs who think JavaScript is really cool and awesome, but I think it's actually one of the key undermining factors that currently threatens the web. Because I think as a technology, it encourages website owners and developers to implement certain things that aren't beneficial for end users, but only beneficial for website owners. Like excessive tracking of people's personal information across the web and building very slow loading web pages that make very high demands of the hardware, like your mobile phone, that it actually ends up running on. So if there's one thing I probably am a bit vocal about, it's JavaScript, and I do think it's a technology that's not inherently a benefit for the web.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, I will start with the next question. Links. Let's talk. I don't think you can really talk about SEO without discussing links, because while algorithms are complex and always evolving, backlinks remain an important constant factor in SEO. So, what are your top tricks when it comes to link building?
Top tricks for link building. I sort of accidentally stumbled on a formula for link building which aligns with my business name Polemic and my brand reputation. When you pick an argument, you make a very strong argument for or against something, especially against something. It tends to work. Late last year, I wrote 2 articles fairly shortly after another. One was about bias in Google News, because news SEO in Google News is one of my specialties. And in August, I wrote an article about that in the wake of Donald Trump tweeting about how Google News is biased against them. And I investigated that claim in a bit more detail. A pretty in-depth post, about 1,500, nearly 2,000 words, I think, about how the Google News algorithm works, what goes into that, etc., etc. And it got maybe 15 links, so I thought, that's not too bad. A couple of weeks after that, I wrote a 1,200-word angry rant about accelerated mobile pages and why I think they're total bullshit. And that got over 300 links pointing to it. I think if you take a strong stance on something, and especially if you manage to, base that in fact and give it a bit of a well-rounded argument, like I did in my anti-accelerated mobile pages blog post, people do appreciate that and will happily quote that and cite that and link to it. So for me, that has been a bit of a secret formula, not so secret now, of course. That if you do pick a fight, if you have a bit of an argument, and you do it the right way, so you don't make it personal, but you attack an idea or concept or technology, that people will appreciate that and can drive a lot of links to your site.
I keep repeating that as a theme, but this is again polemical. So if you're polemical, then it's going to create ripples. So this is exactly what your company's name is about. But this is also kind of what Trump does as well. Speaking of Trump, he's the first mover, so that kind of like, in media, so that kind of creates the ripple effect. But okay,
absolutely. But better or worse, you have to sometimes admire this here goal of the man to say his things and put it out there that normal people wouldn't even dare say in any reasonable, civilized context. Mm-hmm. He doesn't seem to be particularly burdened by that.
Yeah, I think it creates a debate on the internet. The moment there's a debate on the internet, that's when your links are spreading, right? So when people have something to talk about on either extreme. So that's interesting that you list that as your top hack. But we'll keep that in mind. And I'll jump to the next question, which is, let's compare Facebook ads and SEO. So when it comes to getting more traffic, running ads and SEO are two of the best options we have. Which one do you think works better?
Now, I'm, of course, massively biased being an SEO guy, and I actually deleted my Facebook account more than a year ago, and I haven't missed it a single day. So I would say SEO, but I also say that about all advertising versus SEO, not just Facebook advertising. Because advertising only works as long as you keep spending money on it. And it's an ongoing process. And it's very addictive. I tend to call online advertising the crack cocaine of digital marketing because it's very addictive. Instant satisfaction. But the moment you stop spending, you hit the wall, traffic goes away, and you have a massive downer after that. As SEO takes longer, it's a more in-depth process, and it's more about persistence. But once you have that process built into how you do things on your website, you're not actually actively spending money on SEO as such, and more just building it into a process of how you create and publish and promote content. And then SEO tends to be the long-term reward off the back of that, with good rankings and good traffic and search. So I think in the short term, advertising definitely works better. In the long term, SEO always wins.
Okay. And within advertising, if you had to compare Google AdWords and Facebook ads, for example, I mean, they're both incredibly powerful advertising platforms. Which one would you choose?
If I could help it, I wouldn't choose either of them.
Okay.
But I think if we have to go into the question a little bit, it really depends on the context. I mean, Google Ads is very powerful for certain commercially focused searches. People searching for products, people searching for with any sort of commercial intent. Then Google advertising is very powerful because people tend to go to a search engine to fulfill those sorts of queries. Whereas Facebook ads can be very powerful based on the social proof behind it. If a celebrity likes this, or something that a friend has recommended, and you manage to capitalize on that with targeted advertising. That a friend has liked this company Facebook page, and then you can show relevant ads to other friends. That can work really well as well. Probably not in the same direct click fashion that Google Ads do, but more in building that long-term brand loyalty and allowing people to feel good about a brand even before they even start
using it,
buying anything from it. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any clients who have now just completely stopped advertising and are just doing SEO?
I tend not to recommend that to my clients. Never put all your eggs in one basket, even if it is the SEO basket. Yeah. Because, even if Google just throws one little hiccup there, then, that could be the end of all your traffic. So I had a client that only did SEO, and I told them, no, you have to do some advertising as well. So they started experimenting with Facebook ads and Google ads, and they're actually quite happy with that. But I would tend to tell my clients, don't just do one thing, do multiple things and try to excel at all of them.
Because a little bit of cocaine is always good. So.
In the right context, but let's not go into that tonight.
All right. Is the next one mine or yours, Anushka?
I'll take it. I just wanted to explore the very obvious relationship between SEO and content marketing. I mean, I think content has just become more creative and socially friendly now, as opposed to the SEO friendly keyword stuffed articles that we sometimes come across. New forms of content like chatbots and interactive content, basically, they've really grown in the past year. So how do you think that they affect SEO?
Yeah, it's been really encouraging actually to see content marketing mature as an industry, and actually not just be about filling some weekly blog post on some content calendar schedule, but actually take their remit seriously and to create content in all sorts of formats that drive value for the business. I do think that content marketing and SEO should go hand in hand, just like it should go hand in hand with social media and email marketing where appropriate.
Yeah.
Because what works really, really well on Facebook and Twitter might not necessarily rank well in search engines, and there's a compromise to be found there. There's a happy medium there that content marketers and SEOs and social media managers need to find to make sure that whenever content is created and published and promoted, it ticks the boxes for all the kinds of different platforms, including search and social media, that is going to be used on.
Okay. And can you give some suggestions to our listeners on how to create high-ranking content?
I think you have to follow where Google wants to go. Google wants to give good answers. Google's only real intent when it comes to search is to keep people using Google. So that people never see the need to go to any other search engine, which means Google wants to fulfill search queries as efficiently and painlessly as possible. So when you create content to rank well in search engines, you need to make sure that it fulfills that purpose, that it answers questions, that it helps people solve problems, and that it doesn't involve more work for users to consume your content and do whatever they need to do after that. So if you keep that in mind, that it solves problems for people or connects them to whatever they're looking for as fast as possible, with as little obstacles as possible, then I think in the long run you're not really going to go well.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this with, I deal with interactive content, and I've seen that if you, create a quiz or a calculator that gives some value to the people, then it just encourages them to share something funny or highly personalized with other people. And so if you encourage them to share it or use it in their own content, you get them to link back to you. And the more links your piece of content requires, the more SEO value it has. So
Absolutely.
basically, viability basically makes for some good SEO.
That definitely helps.
I was going to ask about, so given a random URL, what is your process for diagnosing it for SEO issues? What is your first step usually?
Actually looking at the page.
Okay.
Look at the page, see how fast it loads, look at the source code, look at the purpose and intent of the page. Does it fulfill a specific intent? Is it useful for whatever purpose? If it is useful, does it signpost its usefulness properly? Does it have a good title, good meta description, good headline? Is it confusing, or is it very clear what it wants to do? Is it very well linked from internal and external sources? And like I said, the source code, is it clean code? Does it load fast? Can Google very quickly understand what the purpose of and intent of the page is? Is there structured data implemented? Etc., etc. There's a lot of different tools you can use for each of those different aspects, but I find that the starting point of analyzing any page or any website is to first become a user of the web page and website, and then seeing about the usefulness of the page in the wider context of both the website and the internet as a whole.
Okay. Do you want to ask the next one, Anushka?
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, you go ahead. That's okay.
Oh, you want me to ask it? All right, so what do you consider as more significant, creating content or building backlinks?
They go hand in hand, don't they? I mean, if you just do links but you don't do much with content, you're going to hit a sort of a ceiling fairly quickly. And the other way around, if you publish a lot of content but you don't really promote it, don't actively go out there and try and get links to it, again, you're just wasting a lot of effort and you're going to hit that ceiling. So, you need to do both in equal measures, I would say.
This is like every time we ask you to pick between two things, you pick.
I promise, I'm generally not known as a fence sitter, but I do want to give good, valuable answers. Sometimes the answer is just, it depends.
Oh dear, you're right.
Okay. So, we've talked about how a lot of SEO tips and tricks. My final one is, how will you cross-check whether your SEO campaign is working or not? And I've actually based this question out of like a quiz that we have, and it does really well. The quiz basically it tests your SEO knowledge, and a lot of people seem to take that quiz. So it makes me think that a lot of people don't really know what, like you said, SEO is like a growing industry. So I think a lot of people don't really know where they stand and how to really check whether your efforts are working or not. So if you could tell us how you can cross-check whether your SEO campaign is working, I think it would be very useful for our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's all about getting more traffic and conversions from organic search. But of course, that falls under a wider bucket of success for a website. Specifically for SEO, I would always look at, are the pages that you're optimizing getting more traffic? Are they winning more links? Are they ranking better for the keywords that you're targeting? And Google Search Console is a really good source of data for that. But like I said, in the end, you have to relate it back to business goals, like everything you do online. SEO is not just done for its own sake; it serves the wider business purpose, and that all comes down to more traffic and more conversions from organic search. And that should be the high-level reporting that every SEO should be reporting on. This is the value that SEO is bringing to the business, and then the nitty-gritty is just more about tactical execution of your specific SEO activities and how you monitor and implement that in the long run.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share the link to the quiz that we made with you, like the one that tests your SEO knowledge. And I'm going to share it with everyone listening so that we can all compare how we performed against Barry Adams himself. I'm really going to do that. Is that okay?
Oh dear. No pressure on me at all then.
No.
That was a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
All right. So so he's going to take it later, right? Not right now.
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So just to end, what are the top 3 tips that you'd like to give to marketers to rank better on Google?
My first one would be not to obsess too much about Google, but follow where your users want to go. So create content that is useful for your users and promote it, and Google tends to follow. Second tip is be careful with JavaScript, because it can really throw a spanner in the works. And the third is, no matter how much Google says you don't want to do link building, you do need to do link building. It is still the most important signal that Google has to evaluate quality and trustworthiness of websites. So go out there and get links, but make sure you do that in such a way that Google won't frown too much on.
Okay. So I guess that's it. Do you have any questions, Anushka?
I mean, I would, an upcoming trend that I don't think we've really talked about it in this conversation was mobile. I mean, if you've been involved in the SEO realm in the past year, you know about mobile search. And I think it was in October that Google started really focusing on indexing based on mobile. So what do you think about that? I'd like to know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, it has changed the way that I at least analyze websites to a certain degree, because Google has been hammering on the mobile-first indexing process for quite a while.
Yeah.
So I think what you need to do is put yourself again in the shoes of your users and make sure you look at your own website through the lens of a mobile device. I think us as professionals working on our own websites, we tend to have a bit of a risk of only looking at our own site when we're on a desktop or laptop computer, because that's when we're at work. And we never actually do the same as our users and just look at our own websites on our phones and try to use it on our phones. So that's, I think, a very important aspect of it, and make sure that, you become, again, like I said earlier, you become a user of your own website in the same context as your own customers, which is generally on a mobile device. But that too depends a bit on the context. If you're a very B2B focused platform or website, you tend to have more desktop users and laptop users, because people tend to look for your products and services more in the context of their own working environment, which is usually behind a laptop or a desktop. Whereas if you're very B2C focused with end users and consumers in mind, then mobile is obviously going to be the majority of the traffic in most contexts.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
I mean, generally speaking, most websites nowadays, when they optimize for mobile, use responsive design, which means there's not a lot that can go wrong for SEO. It's only when you end up working with some outdated platforms or websites with legacy issues that have dynamic serving or separate mobile websites that things can get quite hairy for SEO, and there's a lot more risk there. But for new-ish websites using responsive design, it tends not to be too much of a problem because desktop and mobile versions are identical as far as Google is concerned.
Okay.
Do you have clients who come specifically focused on the mobile versions?
Yes, I do, and that can sometimes be tough conversations to have with a client, especially if they have an old m.mobile website or something like that. And my first recommendation is get rid of that, and then they say they can't. I'm like, well, then anything I say is going to be fairly meaningless after this, because you're just going to be running a marathon with one foot cut off, basically.
You don't mince words, do you?
Well, that's where the name Polemic also comes from. People ask me for advice, they get my honest opinion. So.
Yeah. Saksham, you can add your comment again for like the 20th time in this conversation.
Oh, the Polemic Digital, yeah.
Yeah.
So, guys, I'm just like, I can address the audience and tell them. This was Barry Adams from Polemic Digital, as you all know. But yeah, joining us for Marketer of the Month. Thanks, Barry, for joining us. I think these were all the questions, right, Anushka?
Yep, that's it.